Hello class, in this video we're going to be discussing Chapter 2 in your book, The Profession of Dietetics. So what is dietetics? The chapter starts with this quote, "to benefit as many as possible." And this appeared on the seal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which was formerly known as the American Dietetic Association from the very beginning. And I really like this quote, to benefit as many as possible, because I think it kind of captures what the profession is all about. Everybody eats, so if you become a dietetics practitioner, you'll be able to benefit many people because since your career is related to food, you'll be able to benefit them. So dietetics is based in the belief that optimal nutrition is essential for the health and well-being of everyone. That's what that quote kind of means. And now more than ever, nutrition and dietetics is seen as a very integral component of the healthcare field. If you do decide to pursue a career in dietetics, you're going to see that the dietitian is always an important component of the healthcare team, whether that's in a hospital, in a center for people with kidney disease, in an outpatient setting, in a skilled nursing facility, wherever that might be. You will work with a team of social worker, nurse, MD, and the registered dietitian will be a really important component of that team. And this is because people are starting to realize what a huge role nutrition does play in health. So what is a dietetics position? You're probably hearing words like nutritionist, registered dietitian, dietetic technician, and we're going to talk about all of those terms in this video today. But a dietetics position is any position that will require the use of your education, training, and experience in nutrition. So you'll have a huge diversity of opportunities. I always say that being a dietitian is kind of like the little black dress. There's a lot of different iterations, a lot of different ways that you could wear a black dress. But at the end of the day, you'd still be a dietitian. So, you could work in a hospital, you could work at a skilled nursing facility, you could own a private practice, you could work in fitness, you could do so many different things, work in the community, etc. So you'll have a great diversity of opportunities if you decide to pursue a career in dietetics. Okay, so what is a profession? The goals committee of the Academy states that a profession is going to require these 5 characteristics. So specialized knowledge, maintenance of high standards of achievement and conduct, instruction in skills and methods with scientific, historical, or scholarly principles, commitment to continued study, and lastly, a primary purpose to render a public service. So how does dietetics fall into the concept of a profession? So it has a specialized body of knowledge, so nutritional knowledge is highly specialized, and the specialized knowledge is translated into services that are rendered to society. So maybe a dietitian will have a specialized knowledge about diet for diabetes and then provide education to people with diabetes in the society. Third, dietetics professionals have an obligation to their patient or client that will override personal considerations. There's also a concern for competence and honor among practitioners. We practice evidence-based practice, meaning we won't just recommend something unless there's sufficient research that's peer-reviewed that indicates that whatever we might be recommending is, in fact, based on the evidence, not just anecdote. And lastly, there's an obligation for continuous education and research. The field of nutrition, as we learned in the last chapter, is super young. New research comes out every day, so dietitians and dietetic technicians are obligated to continue their education in the field. All right, so you've heard me use a lot of words up until this point. Registered dietitian, registered dietitian nutritionist, dietetic technician. There's a lot of different acronyms. And so what is the difference? There's a nutritionist. Does that mean they're a registered dietitian? So let's break it down. A registered dietitian is basically somebody that has to have a 4-year degree in nutrition and then complete a supervised practice experience and then sit for a national exam. To do that, you will become, if you do all that, you'll become a registered dietitian. And an RD and an RDN, meaning registered dietitian nutritionist, these are the same thing. These are exactly the same thing. The governing body that oversees registered dietitians decided a few years ago in 2017 that registered dietitians could use the word registered dietitian nutritionist to better reflect what they actually do. Much to my dismay, many people, when I say I'm a registered dietitian, they don't even know what that job is. So saying a registered dietitian nutritionist better reflects to the public what dietitians actually do, meaning they have a specialized body of knowledge in nutritional science and they apply that to help others. So in some states, dietitians require licensure. So that's what this term LD means. In California, dietitians do not have licensure. So somebody, though, in another state like New York could have RD and LD both after their name, but that just both of those mean that the person is a dietitian. But in states that require licensure, they would have this after their name, licensed dietitian. Okay, so that's RD and RDN. Now what about dietetic technician? So to become a registered dietetic technician, a DTR, or the new term NDTR, again to better reflect that these folks deal with nutrition, you would have to also receive education, but it's not as long of a degree. A diet technician is a 2-year degree, and then also a supervised practice experience, which we're going to talk about later in the course, and then again sitting for a national exam to become the DTR. So then if all these refer to dietitians and nutritionists, dietitians and dietetic technicians, what is somebody that's just a nutritionist? Well, basically anybody can go out and use this title with essentially no training in the field. If you decide that you are interested in food, you can open your own business and say that you're a nutritionist, and that title is not regulated. So it's really important to be really careful using the term registered dietitian versus nutritionist. Not everybody has this. If you're looking for somebody who has the education and experience to back up the title, you're going to want to go with the registered dietitian or the dietetic technician. Now, if you're looking, if you want somebody that's going to reimburse you for services from insurance, you'd have to go with a registered dietitian. The person out on the street that opened an office and is advising people and giving them nutritional counseling, but is just a nutritionist, doesn't have any of these degrees, will not be reimbursed by insurance companies for those services. So that's an important point. Who are dietitians? So unfortunately, dietitians at the moment don't represent the populations that they serve. Dietitians are 96% female, median age of 47, predominantly white, and have a median years of experience of 17. This is really unfortunate because the profession would really benefit from an increase in diversity and being more representative of the people that they will eventually be serving. Problem in the field of dietetics as a whole, and the Academy is trying with recruitment, etc., to promote people of different backgrounds that look a little bit different than this example of a dietitian that I have on this slide to come and be the nutrition experts. So in terms of education, who are dietitians? 46% do hold a master's degree. In a few years, it will be a new requirement for dietitians to have a master's degree. 4% hold a doctorate. 74% are members of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. 47% have that state license, that LD that I was talking about earlier. And 19% hold one or more specialty certifications. Now, what is a specialty certification? So a specialty certification might mean a certified specialist in renal nutrition, meaning kidneys. in diabetes, in eating disorders, in clinical nutrition. So 19% or more of dietitians hold these specialty certifications. This requires additional education, additional experience, work experience in the field. Typically, a certification will have an education requirement and then a requirement for hours worked in the field. So this is something that a lot of dietitians, or 19% of dietitians end up getting in the course of their career, and that can hold really valuable because, again, as we've spoken about, there's lots of different career paths that you can do as a dietitian, so it can be really helpful to specialize in a certain certification. Another certification that you can get is a certification in geriatric nutrition, which is something really valuable with the population aging as it is. Okay, so who are the dietetic technicians? So 28% hold a bachelor's degree or higher, 43% are academy members, 8% hold a state license, and 10% hold one or more specialty certifications like I talked about on the last slide. So let's look at the employment of dietitians. Where do they work and what do they do? The most common employment setting that you would see for a dietitian is in a hospital. So 24% of RDs and 33% of diet techs do work in a hospital. Then we see extended care facilities, 10% and 20% respectively, and I think we'll probably see this number increase as we have a need for more extended care facilities as the population ages. Clinic or ambulatory care centers, so that's 12% and 1% respectively. Community or public health programs, an example of this would be like WIC or Head Start. This is 77% of RDs and 8% of DTRs. And then the balance is others that work in a wide variety of other settings, some of which I've already mentioned, like private practice, like eating disorders. I have a colleague friend who is a dietitian and she works for the Olympic committee doing sports dietetics. So many different iterations of this career. If you want to take a second and think of something about nutrition that specifically interests you, that could probably be a job as a dietitian, depending on what it is. But if it's not a job on this list, it doesn't mean that it's not out there. So even though there's many different iterations of what a dietitian can do, there's 7 key practice areas. So clinical in acute care or inpatient, meaning in a hospital, clinical and ambulatory care, meaning in sort of a transitional care facility where you are temporarily when you leave the hospital before you go home, and then clinical maybe in a long-term care facility where you require extensive care that isn't as acute as what you might need in the hospital, but you still won't be able to go home. Food and nutrition management, so managing large food service operations like Sodexo or at a large hospital. Community nutrition, again, like the WIC or the Head Start. Consultation in business is a growing and emerging area of dietetics, so maybe working as a consultant for large corporations on their wellness programs, etc. Nutrition education, whether that looks like educating the public in an outpatient setting, whether that's a job like my job, being a nutrition instructor, many different iterations of what education could look like, and then also working in research. So what is the salary range for RDNs and DTRs? So the book says that the average median income after a year for an RDN is $61,000, but this is nationally. I looked it up in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the average median income for an RDN in the state of California is actually more like $71,000, and this reflects the higher cost of living. So that's something interesting to note. If you want to look up on the website, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, you can find updated information about this profession and any other profession if you're curious about that. Then that salary can be affected by a number of things. So it can be affected by years in practice. Obviously, if you have more experience, more years in practice, you're probably going to be able to command a greater salary. Your area of practice. Certain areas pay more than others. Working in a hospital doesn't always pay as much, but working in renal care or something more specialized would probably pay more. the number of degrees you hold. So if you have a master's degree or a PhD, you can command a higher salary. Your scope of responsibility. How much responsibility are you having to take in the center where you're working? And then again, your geographic location. We hope that the salary for a person living in a particular geographic area compensates them and gives them a living wage to stay in that geographic location. Of course, here in Monterey, it's a very expensive area, so dietitians tend to be paid more than the national average, and because of that high cost of living. All right, so since the nutrition profession, as we've discussed, is committed to helping others through food, it would make sense that the areas that affect the public at large are also priorities for the profession as well. So here are 5 priority areas for the profession: obesity and overweight, aging. We've already talked a little bit today about the graying of the population. Complementary care and dietary supplements. Alternative medicine is kind of lumped in under this umbrella as well, and that's a huge area of interest, and I think going to be one of the biggest trends in nutrition right now. Preserving a safe and nutritious food supply. And lastly, the human genome and genetics. There's a new area of study called nutrigenomics, which essentially studies the way that our diet affects whether or not certain genes are expressed or not expressed, and it's super fascinating and all made possible by the discovery of the human genome. So what are some of the issues facing dietetics practice today? So of course, disease prevention through improved diet as always, but right now there's a huge increase in diabetes, and diabetes often leads to kidney failure, so dietitians specializing in diabetes and renal disease have their work cut out for them in disease prevention and through improved diet in that sense. And then also there's the growing aging population, and at the same time, as people get sicker and learn that we can, and there's this emphasis on preventing disease through diet, we also have the population having a really strong interest in nutrition, probably more than it's ever been, and people just really being more interested in the way that diet and lifestyle can affect their health. Medicare coverage might change. I'm not going to go too much into this in this presentation, but trends show that this probably won't affect the number of healthcare workers, but it is important to note that if people aren't able to pay for nutrition education, this could have an impact. There's also the lack of public knowledge and recognition of what an RD or a DTR is. As I said on a previous slide, when I first started out as a dietitian, many people in my life, my family included, didn't even know what a registered dietitian was. And this is also related to the fact that the media promotes a lot of inaccurate nutrition information. People tend to look to people like Dr. Oz instead of nutrition professionals like registered dietitians for nutrition information. Most people don't know how to evaluate a research study, especially one nutrition related, and discern whether it's a good study or a poorly done study. They figure that if the media prints it or publicizes it, that it must be true. So these are all issues facing dietetics practice right now. And I just want to lastly introduce you all to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. This is the most prominent organization for dietitians. It's also the oldest. They develop and continue to update standards of professional practice that dictate what the scope of a dietitian's practice is depending on their practice area. So essentially, what are they allowed to do? What is their responsibility? That's something that would fall under their scope of practice. They also have many dietetic practice groups. DPGs for short. The Academy has 26 DPGs, and then each DPG has subunits. And what these essentially are a group of dietitians that come together with a similar practice area. So, for example, there's a geriatric practice group, there's a kidney practice group, there's a diabetes practice group, there's a nutrition education practice group, there's a women's health practice group. Some practice groups that I'm a member of is the integrative medicine practice group. I'm also a member of the women's health practice group and the renal practice group. And all of these practice groups host webinars, host continuing education presentations. They have a newsletter, and it's just a great way if you're a professional in the field to kind of keep your pulse on your area of practice, and of course make friends and consult professionally with other dietitians that have a similar area of practice or interests as you.